How long you been doing this kind of thing?
21 years.
So you're a veteran.
Kind of. Yeah, but I still learn every day.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been writing for over 50 years, and every day I get surprised. Every day.
How did you get started writing?
Well, I was in college at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I started taking drama courses, and I fell under the sway of an extraordinary Jesuit priest who had been the first PhD to get a PhD from Yale back in the 50s, and he was a mesmerizing man.
What was his name?
Father John Walsh. He died not so long ago. He was deep in his 90s, but an extraordinary teacher. He had he taught a course called History of the Theater, and it was what we used to call a Mickey Mouse course. Everybody got an A, but he demanded one thing of you. There were 300 kids in the class. He demanded absolute silence, no messing around. And there were jocks in the class, and there were sorority girls, and it was hard to keep these 300 kids, quiet. But he managed to do it. But he was so interesting about the theater, and he was writing on the board all the time, writing the names of plays. And I took down every name, and I went and I read the play. I was just so taken with it. I think I took the course much more seriously than anybody there. But that sort of got me started, and then I started acting there in undergraduate and graduate school, and then I got into Yale. Came out here. That's how I came out here. Not to the northwest corner as such. I mean, I lived in and around New Haven when I was in school there. But then I met a woman in Stockbridge, Mass. And her family had a place in Lakeville. So she brought me to Lakeville. And that was, Eric, that was 1970. I lived on Belgo Road and Reservoir Road. And I lived in New York off and on. I lived in D.C., but basically I've been here. This has been my base since about 1970. So when I run into people, they say, "Oh, we've been here since 1985." I say, "Oh, please, 1985? Are you kidding?" So I'm not exactly a native, but I've been here quite a while.
Yeah.
And love it. I wouldn't live anyplace else. You probably know people who have traveled around the world. They come back here, they look around, they say, "There's nothing more beautiful than being here."
Yeah.
It's just gorgeous.
I've read some of your plays.
Oh, really?
Online. And I can't help but mention that there's an undercurrent of anger in some of them. Is that right? Or am I misreading them?
Well, I think it's anger at injustice.
Social injustice.
Yes, very much so.
Uh-huh.
I had an experience which I was just reminded of. It was back in the 80s in Chicago. I worked a lot in Chicago. That's where I grew up, and I keep going back there. I haven't been back there since the pandemic, but I would go there 3-4 times a year because I've worked there a lot. But I was having a play down in Chicago, and after the performance, a man came up to me. I didn't know him. And he said, he was quite complimentary. He said, "I really liked your play." And then he said something which really surprised me, which I still have not been able to analyze. He said, "You don't believe in progress, do you?"
Huh.
And I said, "It really stopped me." And I said, "No, I guess I don't." And I didn't have the presence of mind to say, "What is it in my play that makes you think that?" I didn't say that. I should have said that. And it's because, I mean, we've obviously made great strides in medicine, but then we're in the middle of a pandemic. You know, so it seems to me that one part of the world is getting better, another part of the world is getting worse, and it adds up to no progress, it seems to me. So I think you're right to use the word anger, but it's not at a particular person or group, or it's at injustice. And I had a mentor at Yale who said to me a long time ago, he said, "Your subject is justice." And that stuck with me, and I think he's right.
So that's what you basically try to portray in your plays.
Yeah, I've got a lot of. I'm a sort of a frustrated lawyer, I have to say, and it wasn't so many years ago that I got all the law school books out, applications, and was going to apply to Yale or someplace to go to law school. I didn't do it eventually, but a lot of my plays have courtroom scenes in them. The very first professional play I had done was at Yale, and it was set in a courtroom, and a critic named Marilyn Stasio, who still is writing for the Times more than 50 years later, she described it as a courtroom drama that would give Perry Mason a heart attack.
Huh.
So that's always stuck with it. That's one of my favorite quotes. But there have been other quotes that I remember too. The first plays I had done in New York, they were done in Alphabet City on East 3rd between B and C, and the Village Voice called them the worst of off-Broadway. So, you know, should I have quit there, Eric? Just stopped. No, I didn't quit. I got more angry is what I got at that injustice. So I just kept writing. And now I'm working on new things. I'm working with a terrific group of people in Hartford. We got a small grant. It's called the Heartbeat Ensemble Company. They have a theater right across from the Mark Twain House. And we just did a week's long workshop. And it's about a woman named Gwen Reed. I have a 20-year-old. I have 3 daughters. My youngest is 20 years old. And I saw somewhere online that I could make an application for a grant. And coupling it with collaborating with this theater in Hartford, which I didn't know anything about, other than its name. So I went to my daughter, Calpurnia, and I said, "Callie, would you go online and find me a woman, preferably a woman of color, in the Hartford area?" And within about a minute, she came back with this woman named Gwen Reed. Gwen Reed grew up in Hartford, actually, in the first public housing project called Bellevue Square. She then worked in the tobacco fields outside Hartford. And you probably know there are tobacco fields outside Hartford, but you know there are a lot of people in Connecticut, they don't even know that. At one time there were 200,000 acres of tobacco fields. Now it's down to about 2,000, owned by one man. But Gwen Reed worked in the tobacco fields. She had an extraordinary mother who was quite literate. She also worked in the tobacco fields. But she knew her Shakespeare, her Alfred Lord Tennyson, and she would read to Gwen and the other migrant workers in the tobacco fields. She would read to them from Shakespeare, Tennyson, Wordsworth, all the great 19th century authors. So Gwen Reed grew up knowing these things, knowing these poems, and she started doing community theater in and around Hartford. Eventually working at the Hartford stage, doing some of their earliest work. She comes to the attention of somebody working for Quaker Oats. Quaker Oats, this representative, approached her and said, "We want you to play Aunt Jemima." So they dressed her up as Aunt Jemima, and she went to county fairs, Kiwanis Club events, dressed as Aunt Jemima. She made the pancakes right in front of everybody, served the pancakes, and then went back to the tobacco fields, and back and forth, for 18 years. So I'm writing, with the help of these extraordinary people in Hartford, a play about Gwen Reed. An extraordinary woman. She was also interested in children's literacy. So she was never married, never had any children, but she always had little kids around her. And she had little tiny pieces of furniture in her apartment for the kids to sit in. Her door was always open. Kids were coming in and out. And she would recite Shakespeare to them. This African-American woman in the projects of Hartford was reciting Shakespeare to these kids.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful, isn't it? That's the word. There's no better word than that. She was an extraordinary woman. She died in 74, after 18 years in the tobacco fields. What you should know about me, which we haven't touched upon, is that I have, since 1976, I have worked in large part with black and brown people. You know, you might not think that we're sitting here in this white area of Connecticut, but I've worked with them for 45 years. So much so that many of my subjects of the plays are black stories. So much so that often before people meet me, having just read the plays, they presume I'm black.
Well, that's a compliment.
I think absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely, it's a compliment. In fact, my dear friend Andre DeShields, who I've worked with a lot, he just won a Tony for Hadestown on Broadway. He just told somebody, I just heard this today, as a matter of fact. He told somebody he was doing a presentation in Denver, of all places. He said, "Lonnie Carter is the blackest white man I know and the whitest black man I know." I said, "I love it." I love it.
Yeah.
So, and I've also worked a lot with Filipinos.
One of your Filipino plays is played around the world.
Yes, it has. It has. Magno Rubio, the Romance of Magno Rubio has played. Yes, it's played in international festivals in the Philippines. I was able to go there. Praise the Lord. Romania for an international theater festival. So the play has, in fact, and the play's been done in Singapore. I was thinking that just yesterday. And now it's some scenes anyway are going to be done in Honolulu, where the full production of the play has been done in Honolulu, and now some scenes are being done at Chaminade University, which I knew about. I think it's the only Catholic university in the Philippines. Anyway, so that stuff is going on. I work with many Filipinos, and they are I've worked with probably a couple hundred Filipinos, and there's only one person, and I won't use his name, that I wouldn't trust with my life. Now that's pretty amazing to say, I think. Just one person. He tried to cheat me out of money. But everybody else, They're the best, as you probably know, they're the best medical caregivers in the world, best nurses, doctors, medical people, and lovely, lovely people, and great food. I must say, terrific food. So that's been a real joy working with Filipinos.
It was the middle of spring, and we were picking peas on the hillside near our bunkhouse. Magno Rubio and I were working side by side, astride neighboring roads which began from the slope of the hills and ended atop a stony plateau where goats and sheep were let loose by farmers to eat the destructive loco weeds. We worked up and down the hills, crawling on our knees like brown beetles. The foreman Peña, he was the best.
He was the best.
Of the worst. Oh!
Forget your better, we're not about to win this bout. We will prevail and rout you if this rain ever stops. We'll bust your chops.
Let's talk about your childhood for just a moment.
Sure.
And perhaps you could relate some of the stories of how you interacted with black and brown people back in those days.
I actually didn't.
Really?
I didn't grow up with. In fact, I'm remembering the first reading of a play I had in Chicago, which I had an all-black cast. And at the end of the reading, I didn't know any of these people. One of the actors said to me, "Did you grow up with black people?" And I said, "No, I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, which was all white. It was Polish, Slovak, Hungarian. It was all Eastern European, Central European." I said, "But no, I did not grow up with black people." But I also know that I grew up just adoring Jackie Robinson. I thought he was the greatest guy in the world. I still think he's one of the greatest guys. I mean, talk about a hero. And an elegant man. I'm remembering at the end of his baseball career, he made the All-Star team. And he already had like a little paunch. And he's up at bat and he hits a triple. So he's circling the bases, he winds up on third base. And the audience, the spectators are going crazy. They love it. The pitcher winds up and suddenly Jackie Robinson bolts for home. And the announcer's going, "What? He's trying to steal home." You know what? He did. He stole home. At the end of his career. And I thought, this is so extraordinary. Nobody expected him to do it. I don't even know if the third base coach knew he was going to do it. He just did it. And I always think back to that. I said, that man, what guts, what courage, what energy, the likes of which I don't have. I couldn't muster that, I don't think. But he was a boyhood hero to me. I don't know if that explains anything, but it's sort of his background.
Well, you were around in the 1960s when a lot of social awareness came to the forefront.
Absolutely.
In the counterculture.
Yep. I was at Yale at the drama school in 1968, 69, and that was during a major Black Panther trial in New Haven. I remember that one of the sort of minor figures in the Black Panther trial, his first name was Lonnie. And I remember getting out of my car one day and stenciled on the sidewalk said, "Free Lonnie." And I thought, are they talking to me? Maybe, but that was a rough time in New Haven. Whoa, National Guard up and down the streets of Yale. It was tough.
What's been the most exciting thing that's happened to you working in the theater?
I think it was a performance of the Filipino play in Chicago, The Romance of Magno Rubio, and it didn't directly affect me, although I was present for the performance. It was opening night, and the fellow who was playing the title character, his name was Rodney Toe. He's a Chicagoan, but he had left Chicago to come to New York, build a career. So when we were about to do the show in Chicago, we called him back to do the play. And his family had never seen him act. He comes back to Chicago, opening night. His 92-year-old grandmother is in the audience. She's never seen him act. Nobody in the family's seen him act. He comes out for the curtain call. He's weeping. She's weeping. I think that's the most exciting moment I've ever had in the theater. And it was really about Rodney Toe and his lovely grandmother.
What was the scariest moment?
The scariest moment. It was in rehearsal, and there was a woman in my play. It was like maybe 2 days before we were opening, and she just clammed up. She had a very big part. We were in a small theater, maybe seats 150 people, way downtown. And she crawled under one of the audience seats, and she wouldn't come out. We didn't know what to do. We just waited, imploring her to come out. She was terrified. And we were terrified. We didn't know what was going to happen. Is she going to self-combust?
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't have a weapon or anything, thank God.
Yeah.
Because if she did, we wouldn't have known what to do. But I think that's the scariest moment I've ever had. I think maybe this is... You didn't ask me what the funniest thing in the theater was. I was doing a play in Minneapolis, and it was called The Lost Boys of Sudan, and there were a number of black actors in it. And during rehearsal, somebody questioned one of the lines in a constructive way. You know, is that what you really want to say or something? So I, right in front of everybody, rewrote it. And one of the actors, who had just come from, he volunteers at a prison. He had just come from lockdown at a prison in Minneapolis. We didn't know if he was going to make it, if he was going to be let out, if he was going to be held hostage. We didn't, you know, there he was. J.W. Williams is his name. And he saw me, you know, rewriting the piece. And he looked at me and laughed. He said, "Boy, it's a good thing you're a writer, because I don't think you can do anything else." And we all broke up laughing. I said, "You're right, J.W., you are right. I can't do anything else. This is what I do." But that, I think, was the funniest, the funniest thing.
I'm going to zoom back a little bit, Lonnie, to get a picture of your sweatshirt. Agitate, agitate, agitate.
Frederick Douglass said that. I wore that especially for you.